Just doing some reading outside, reading Don't Waste Your Life by John Piper. And just picked up this book yesterday with my kids. We were walking Barnes & Noble, about a chapter in only, but I read something here that changed my perspective on viewing old material, and old meaning like just past material. You know, oftentimes when I go browse a bookstore or try to watch a movie, like if you just browse the top 25 movies on IMDb of all time, there's a good amount of them that are in the 21st century, but a lot of them are old school. Like, I'm talking like black and white. And I always say like, oh, it doesn't hold up to today's movies because the VFX, the story, the technology. And that's very unwise, because a lot of the things that I read about and study, like Stoicism and Christianity, and like, what if I were to have that same lens around Jesus? I think that's very unwise. Truth and beauty and goodness are not determined by when they exist. Nothing is inferior for being old, and nothing is valuable for being modern. I thought that was, you know what? I just lost my place. My pen was my bookmark. Viewing the world as if modern things are more important than things of the past is a very unwise thing to do. And I just told you about why I think so in the beginning. And I just wanted to open up this video with that. Pick up the book, Don't Waste Your Life. I'm going through it, so I can't really recommend anything based more on chapter 1, but I digress. Recently, I've just been in a rut, and it's been more of a mind, like a mental, like, hardship with trying to understand, how do I show up after work, coming home as a father and a husband, to continue to give my all? And what that looks like is just being present, being in my children's world, you know, fighting on the ground with them, you know, having fun, making memories with them, and really just disconnecting my brain from work. It's very difficult, and I had some great conversations with my wife around this. We've been married almost 7 years now, and I just started telling her like about things, like deep conversations around my limiting mindset and beliefs. And usually I would internalize all this, and I told her like, hey, I'm nervous to talk to you about these things because I don't want you to think like I'm going off the deep end or my husband has lost his mind. And again, that's more of an ego thing. And I think here's my overarching love and hate with YouTube. There is so much good that comes from these conversations that I listen to and watch and share and absorb and practice. But there is so much bad. And as a 26-year-old trying to discern what's right and what's not right, man, how easily I'm influenced by crafty words. You know, and it just shows how much more my wife is discerning than I am, because I was just recently watching Diary of a CEO, and he had Scooter Braun, which is like the manager around like Justin Bieber, and I think he had like beef with Taylor Swift or something. And I was watching this, and the first like handful of minutes, I started like realizing, oh, anything that happened with Taylor Swift, it's all her fault. And I was thinking like, this guy can speak really well, and he can show a lot of sympathy, and the way his voice is sounding so smooth and soothing to the ears, and he's being vulnerable to be on this podcast and talk. He must be right. Well, then he told this whole story about when he was growing up. I think he was just becoming a teenager, and he had this problem with lying. And it came to a point to where his dad told him, he said, Scooter, or Scott, yeah, his name is Scott, I believe. He said, Scott, just don't become a liar. And he said he felt like shameful for ever lying. And I might be butchering some of this story, so go watch that video if you want. But basically saying he didn't want to be a liar, because his dad told him, like, just don't be a liar. And he said, okay, I won't do that because I know it's shameful. It's not good to lie. The very next story he told, he goes, I got my foot in the door by selling fake IDs. And Stephen, the host, I don't know why he didn't kind of put him in his place there. I don't know what his theory around it or what his mindset was around it. I don't know if it's like, don't like expose your guests like this or whatnot. But you could have said, hey, man, you just told me this whole story about not lying, but then you got your foot in the door by lying. I don't know if Scooter is so delusional to the fact that that is lying or what have you, but my wife goes, that's what snakes are. They're very, very crafty with their words. That is how they perform. And how I've been deceived in the past by looking up to these influencers that just don't live the life or follow the words that they speak. Thank God for my wife and her discerning heart, because throughout the years, I'm like, I can't believe that happened to this preacher. And someone got a platform and they just ruined it because of this hidden sin. My wife's like, you got to stop putting people on pedestals, because every time you do this, you get shocked by the fact that they're not a perfect human being. And now what I'm trying to do, I'm getting better at, because it's also a fact that I need to continue to learn what Christ says and go back to Scripture through everything. But even things like reading books or listening to modern wisdom or Stoicism or things from business, there's a lot of worldly things out there. Lessons and examples and mindsets. You know, I think of Mr. Beast, like all he wants to do is make the best YouTube videos possible at whatever expense. And Alex Hormozy, it's like, hey, he wants to build a business and he doesn't have time for kids. Kids are his people that watch his videos. And I'm not saying these mindsets are wrong. I'm just saying, for what I believe Scripture says, our goal, don't waste your life. Don't focus on the things that are here in a moment and then gone tomorrow. Don't focus on the things that are temporary, because we have to store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moth and rust do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. And this is no way saying, I'm not calling out anyone. What I'm saying is, for me as a Christian man, to discern right from wrong and who to listen to and what to absorb and apply has to be through a biblical lens. I just asked ChatGPT today, I said, hey, should a Christian man read Robert Greene's The 48 Laws of Power? And Chat spit back saying, what you should do, or a recommendation, is read the book, but understand it like this. Journal through each law saying, what does this tell you about human nature? And then second, the follow-up, and more importantly, what would Jesus say about this? I think that's awesome. And it said, understand the way the world works and how power works, but know Jesus' word compared to all of these. So that way you can protect against the evil. And there's scripture that says, be as wise as serpents and as innocent as doves. And being wise as serpents means you have to open yourself up to things of this world, so that way you can understand what is happening to be able to protect against it. I don't want to be blindsided or delusional or naive or gullible to the fact that these things are happening. So I need to open, not with fear, but open up these types of books and mindsets to expose myself to the world in order to filter that through the lens of Christ, so I know both sides of what's happening. And Paul even did this with things like, what's the name of the, it's in Acts. No, it's in 1 John. Gnosticism. Paul knew all things about Gnosticism, about like inner liberation and freedom and not needing external forces to give you meaning. There's things like postmodernism and existentialism, all these big terms that literally mean you live. And it talks about it in here, don't waste your life. You live first, and then you find freedom. But there's only two things true in this world, and that's that there is a creator and that there is creation. That's us, that's the trees, that's my garage, that's the fence. people that make these things, right? And going back to Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis, I think it's incredible, where it talks about, C.S. Lewis talks about, look at a painting. A painting is an example of the fact that there is objective truth, that there was a painter. So for us to say, oh, this all just came about, doesn't make, my storage got full on my iPhone, so I'm going to end the video here. With whatever you do it through a biblical lens. Don't be fearful of learning new things, but understand everything is not truth. Truth only comes from Scripture and what God breathed and through Jesus' words. So filter all that you think and do and expose yourself to through that lens. God bless you.